You saw how his three-point shooter was completely deadly. He was hitting from everywhere, especially in the beginning. Yo, this is Tribe with Yo Tribe Sports Bag. I'm back at it with you again today, and you already know what it's about. The NCAA Tournament. March Madness is upon us. But before we do that, let's take care of this YouTube business real quick so that we can get to the business at hand. Give me that subscription by subscribing to the channel. So hit the button right now and subscribe. After you do that, give me the thumbs up that I need so desperately in order for this to spread like wildfire. And while you're doing that, hit the alarm bell. That way you get every drop that I drop whenever I drop it, and you will not miss out. And you could also be part of the crew that's going to help me get to 1,000 subscribers. Hey, everybody would like to have 1 million, but the road to 1 million starts with at least 1,000 in my opinion. So try to get me to 1,000 subscribers, and that would be cool as well. I would like to have a huge sports community. Not just a football community, not just a basketball community, but a sports community. So with all of that said, let's get down to the business at hand. I do thank you for being here. Anyways, March Madness is upon us. And of course, we are happy that it's back in its original form. This is the real NCAA tournament, the way it was supposed to be. 2 years ago, there wasn't a tournament at all as Dayton went undefeated and was left at the altar with nothing to show for it, but a bunch of speculation, and people wondered what could have been, what should have been, what never was. Last year, we saw a tournament, but there wasn't anyone there but the teams participating. We didn't like that. That wasn't what it was all about. The camaraderie was missing. The fans were missing. The enthusiasm you need to be able to move on in each round was missing. Now, it's back in full effect. The NCAA Tournament 2022 will give us everything that we remember, and probably even more, because with the litany of teams that were at the top at one time or another, it changed hands so many times, it is sure to carry over into March Madness, where the little guy has a chance. And what I'm talking about right now with these little guys is the anecdotal part of the NCAA tournament. We talk about it every year, even last year and the year before. The storylines, the anecdotes. And right now it starts with Iona, a team that's not even in the tournament. We talked about Rick Pitino. What Rick Pitino was to college basketball once upon a time, he's now taken to a small school in New Rochelle, New York. They won the regular season MAC title, but lost in the tournament. So now they're in the NIT. Rick Pitino is no longer in the NCAA tournament. What happens there? St. Peter's gets into the tournament, so they're going to represent the MAC. So the little guy wins. In fact, the little guy wins. In that case, St. Peter's. Welcome to the dance, boys. In addition to that, we're talking about Bryan, the 16 seed, which is going to have a playing game against Wright State. They're up there in Rhode Island. That's a small school. This is the Bulldogs' first opportunity at NCAA glory, if it even just means getting to the tournament, not necessarily winning, but they're there. And when they get into that playing game, they have the most prolific duo in college basketball right now, with Peter Kiss and Charles Pride, the two brothers that can go out there and score upon anyone, and they'll have their opportunity. In Dayton, it's not a home game, not even close to home. A much closer home game to Wright State than it is to the Bulldogs. But we'll see how it plays out when they get into their playing game. Congratulations to the Bulldogs for being there. Let's make some magic in this play. They all play that hard, so they have the right to go to San Diego to take on the number 1 seed, which is Arizona. Good luck with that, I'll tell you now. So if you're keeping with the small schools, the schools who helped make this Cinderella story legitimate, we're talking Norfolk State. That's right, Norfolk State is in the mix, and they're playing the defending champions, Baylor. The Baylor Bears will be taking on the Spartans of Norfolk State, coming from the MEAC, and HBCU, a historically black college and university. They're not new coming to the dance. They've been here before. In fact, In 2012, as a number 15 seed, they beat the number 2 seed Missouri. So they're used to the upset special when it comes down to the NCAA tournament and what it provides. And if you're going to watch Norfolk State, if you're going to watch anything that has to do with HBCU, you know the dancing, the boogieing, and all that stuff on a grand scale is going to be there. They're bringing their cheerleaders, and you already know what they can do when the camera is on them and when all eyes are on the tournament. They get down like that for their crown jewels as well. But Baylor, the number 1 seed, one of the number 1 seeds, one of the 4 number 1 seeds, will be taking on the Spartans of Norfolk State from Virginia, of course. And then there's other stories that we can talk about. Jacksonville State. Yes, the number 15 seed, Jacksonville State, coming out of the A-Sun. The Atlantic Sun, they are the champions. Regular season, that is. They lost in their conference tournament. They lost to Jacksonville University. What happened? Why are they champions? Well, Bellarmine was supposed to win the championship. They won the tournament. But because Bellarmine was making the move to Division 1A from Division 2, they were given 4 years to get their act together, get their recruiting brought up to speed so that they can be competitive. Little did anyone know that they were already ready. They got into the A-Sun and they won the championship in their first year. But rules are rules, so they cannot participate. So we now have Jacksonville State, who lost to Jacksonville University, the champions representing the A-Sun. So that's one of those little anecdotal stories and storylines you could think about as we move forward in this NCAA tournament. And then what's going to happen? Jacksonville State is going to take on number 2 Auburn. As we already have seen this year, Auburn has had their ups and downs, especially at the end of the season, but it still was enough to salvage a number 2 seed as they will take on the Gamecocks of Jacksonville State, who, by the way, are number 5 in the country when it comes down to 3-point percentage. They are very deadly at the perimeter, but Auburn, being the bigger school, the more athletic school, they're going to try to stop them. I don't think they'll have too many issues, but they need to keep an eye out on Damari King. He's the leader of 3-point shooting on that Jacksonville State team. They're going to have to keep him in check so things don't get a little awry and we don't have these upsets with the number 2 seed this early in the tournament. And so that takes me to the human interest side of the tournament. We've seen these things all year long. They take these packages, talk about the young player or the player no one's ever heard of. John Morant was once that type of player coming from Murray State, and we saw what he turned out to be. This time around, we head to Davidson for one of the stories that we're looking for. Young Jung Lee, the forward for Davidson, he's from Korea, and he also was part of the 50-40-90 club. For those of you who don't remember or don't even know what that is, it's at least 50% from the field. It's at least 40% from 3-point range, and it is at least 90% from the free throw line. Young Jung Lee was that guy in 2020, not 2021, but he still was effective. Definitely one of the team leaders of Davidson. And what makes this a little bit more intriguing, for that to be the only time that happened in Davidson in history, Steph Curry, the superstar basketball player from the NBA, was from Davidson or is from Davidson. He was a huge player there and he could not hit those feet. In fact, Young Jung Lee is only the 12th person since 1993 to get into that prestigious club. And now he's in the NCAA tournament. They did not win the Atlantic 10. Richmond won. Richmond put on a spectacular game the day of the bid, and they were able to steal a bid, kicking Xavier out of the tournament. So now it's just Davidson and Richmond together again in the tournament. But Richmond was able to put on one of their better games of the season, getting revenge for a loss, a close loss they had against Davidson earlier in the season, and no other than Jacob Gilliard, the biggest thief in all of basketball, one of the biggest thieves of all time. Or he leads college basketball with steals. So we already know what kind of game he brought. And if you saw anything of what he had done in the A-10 tournament, you saw how his 3-point shooter was completely deadly. He was hitting from everywhere, especially in the beginning. He was the one who set the tempo and prevented Davidson from winning the Atlantic 10 Conference. His three-point shooting, his steals, him being a pest all over the court, opening up opportunities for his fellow players, his fellow teammates, and they are now in the tournament, and they'll see what they can do when they take on Iowa. As a number 12 seed, Iowa comes in at the number 5, and we already know as basketball heads what that number 5 12 seed does. The 12-5 matchup is one of the most intriguing matchups in all of the NCAA tournament. 51 times since 1985, the number 5 seed has lost to the number 12 seed. This time around, Richmond, with a team that's very capable, is going to try to pull it off against Iowa. Good luck to them. They're going to need it because Iowa and the Big Ten, and based on the amount of bids that have been given out, the Big Ten is probably the best overall conference from top to bottom in college basketball this year, with 9 bids going into the NCAA tournament. That brings me to this. You talk about a powerful conference like the Big Ten. It leads me to the West Coast Conference, which isn't so powerful. However, they have every year 3 teams that do a round robin against one another because no one else is really able to take the reins from the champion, which is Gonzaga. Almost every year, you have Gonzaga, you have St. Mary's, you have San Francisco, the alma mater of the great Bill Russell. They fight each other every year for the right to get into the tournament. This time, all 3 have gotten into the tournament, with Gonzaga being the number 1 seed of all teams going into this tournament, looking to get their championship that they did not get last year against Baylor, when Baylor just pretty much obliterated them. So what do we have to talk about now? The big boys. That's what you're here for, because in order to talk about the tournament, you have to talk about the Cinderella teams, and you also have to talk about the big boys. Number 2, Duke, probably the biggest story in college basketball going into the tournament. Coach K, in his final season of college basketball, manning the sidelines for the Duke Blue Devils for so many years, is all coming to an end this year, as he brings his charge, his Blue Devils, his top player, Paolo Banchero, who is arguably the number 1 pick in this summer's NBA draft. He brings them all to the tournament as Coach K attempts to come into the tournament and leave as champions, and being champions for Coach K in his final season. We're not just talking about Paolo Banchero, we need to talk about Mark Williams as well. He's someone 7 feet tall that gets his blocks, who cleans the boards with his rebounds, and he can score as well. Duke is going to have something to say, as they always have something to say during tournament time. Even though they may be a dominant team throughout the regular season, they seem to be even more dominant in the postseason. Yeah, they've had some hiccups in the past, Mercer, but they still show up, and you know what you're going to get from a Coach K coached team. And good luck to them as they move on and try to do the impossible. Impossible is nothing when Coach K is on your side. That brings me to number 1, Gonzaga. Yes, the team that was the bridesmaids last year, the runner-ups to Baylor. They didn't win last year, but this time around, they bring Chet Holmgren, the number 1 player in all of high school basketball, who joined their team this season, and he showed up, and he showed out. He showed that he has the NBA ability they thought he had before he came onto the campus at Gonzaga. But even with all of that, the team still belongs to Timmy. Drew Timmy owns the team. It is his team to guide. Chet is part of this team, and so they have big parts and pieces that can aim towards a championship. There are some out there who think that this is finally the time the Bulldogs get their championships. Mark Few's journey will end on April 4th, in the opinion of some, with his shining moment finally. And we'll just have to wait and see about that, because we look at these other teams out there at number 3 seed in Wisconsin, and Johnny Davis, as Wisconsin takes on Colgate. Johnny Davis is obviously one of the best players in the entire country. And as a sophomore, this may be his last season in college basketball. At 6'5", playing the point guard position and just being nasty. I mean, really nasty. He has a twin brother who's not as nasty, but Wisconsin, a number 3 seed, a dangerous team coming from the best conference in basketball for this past season is going to put on a show. You all just need to sit back and watch them. If you have not seen Johnny Davis play at all this season, you're obviously going to get a treat, and a treat with a lot of other players out there as well. That takes me to Ohio State. Ohio State is going to take on Loyola Chicago. Ohio State is a 7 seed coming from the best conference. Chicago Loyola, number 10. We've seen Chicago Loyola just a couple years ago with Sister Jean in tow. Well, guess what? The country's biggest good luck charm is back, and she's 102 years old. And I think she wants to bless them with a championship. She doesn't need divine intervention. She is the intervention. She'll give them an opportunity, if no one else had, to move on into this tournament, maybe the Elite Eight. They do have that kind of team. But as an aside, they have a player named Braden Norris. He's from the Ohio area when he was a high school player. He goes out to Oakland. He beats out a junior as a true freshman. He stays there just for 1 season. He ultimately transfers, has to wait. He ends up at Loyola Chicago. And I say that to say this. That was probably the beginning of when players were using the transfer portal as a second opportunity for recruiting, because his talent didn't say he probably needed to end up at Oakland. His talent said, you know what, you're probably good enough, but we are not sure. So he goes out there to Oakland. He becomes a very stellar player, especially from the 3-point line. They see he could play on that level. So he gets feelers, I figure, and he ultimately ends up with Loyola Chicago. And so here he is. He's now in the tournament, and Loyola Chicago is there too. And they can, make no mistake, upset Ohio State. And before I close this out, let me give you my idea of why these teams, especially this year when you had so much changing going on at the top of the list, whether it was Gonzaga, whether it was Auburn, whoever was up next in the number 1 spot. The reason why that happens, and probably will happen even more during this tournament. See, teams recruit based on their conference. They don't necessarily recruit because they're going to play a team like Duke later on if you're a Big Ten team. They recruit Big Ten players who can play the Big Ten style of ball. You just hope that the level of play is so high and the talent is so high that it doesn't matter if you leave conference or not, you're still going to be able to hold your own. But the detriment is you get a lot of those young players to these big conferences, and they're 18 and 19 years old. They have an immense talent pool, but they're playing against the smaller schools who don't put players into the NBA, who don't even send players to any type of pro career, and they have their 4th and 5th year players on the team who've played together for so long. Chemistry accounts for something. And in this case, chemistry trumps superstar play. We've seen it before. We've seen the Fab Five with Michigan years ago. They had not won anything. They kept getting there, but they were losing to teams that were eventually older than they were, who've played longer together, and the chemistry mattered. And I think you'll see a lot of that this year when it comes down to the tournament. Chemistry does matter. The smaller teams will do a lot more upsetting. The talent pool is pretty equal throughout college basketball. I mean, when you're talking about the bigger conferences, but it's equalized when the smaller schools have the older players with the chemistry, have played long together, know the system, and they've been in pressure situations before. I have a bunch of videos up here you can check out because this is a sports channel. So check out the grab bag of what I have here. Whether it's your boxing fan, football fan, basketball fan, as we're talking right now, it's here for you. Subscribe to the channel and all of that good stuff. Until next time.